I can't remember exactly when it was signed. I think it was last week or something like that. Trump's AI action plan. It's a 23-page document. If you want, I'd recommend you go out and take a look at it. It's a lot of political rhetoric and a lot of that other stuff out there. So I get sometimes people are like, oh, well, I would encourage you to at least go beyond the headlines. I'm going to try and unpack it a little bit more, but I don't expect people to look to me as their core source of truth. I would encourage you to go read the document, go, get some other perspectives on it. Fact check me. If I get something off or whatever, you can share it with me. You can disagree with me. I welcome the conversation. But here's what essentially some of the biggest things that were in it. So it's a 23-page document, a fairly quick read. I've looked through some of the things on it and got a general sense of what it means. And I have some concerns. All right, I'll be honest. I have some real concerns about it on a macro scale. So I'm going to talk about what it means, some of the implications I think we've got to watch out for, and how to respond to it. But some of the biggest things it outlines are one of our major economic goals. I mean, in short, the U.S. is throwing everything at AI. Okay. I mean, am I being hyperbolic? Sure. But in many ways, not really. The AI Act, I can't remember his exact quote, but Trump said something like AI is genius. Okay. So this act reinforces that belief that AI is the solution to pretty much all of our problems, I guess. And so as a country, we're going to invest accordingly. If you believe something is the solution, if you believe it is genius and can solve every problem that you have, I would understand why you would feel it is wise to throw all the resources you have into it. I don't agree with the conclusion, but I can understand how someone would come to that conclusion. Now, there are several key things in it that it's focusing on. One is this desire for the U.S. to spark its economy, like boost its economy. It's largely how we think we're going to justify these tariffs. And by the way, before I go any further, I want to be really clear. I don't have a political dog in this fight. So to the folks who are going to blow me up and say, Christopher, you're too right-leaning, I'm not right-leaning. To the folks who say you're too left-leaning, I'm not left-leaning. I truly am politically homeless. So if you get this sense of, aha, this tells me how Christopher votes, without saying anything else, I'm going to say you're wrong on that. Okay. So I'm trying to be as objective and balanced as I can. So please don't get triggered by what you think I'm, pushing for with this. All right, back to the show. So there are some key things that it's focusing on. One is to stir our economy and justify some of these tariffs that we're putting on these other countries by exporting American AI technology. That is going to be one of our biggest industrial solutions that we are going to offer to the world and make gobs and gobs of money on. Is we are going to export our AI tech stack, and everyone in the world is going to want to buy American AI. Okay, it's the Industrial Revolution in some ways all over again. It's like, hey, 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever, like we have the best AI, so everybody's going to want it. They're going to want to be using it. They're going to want to be dependent on it, and it's going to make us loads of money. Okay, so that's a big part of it. One is preventing woke AI in the government. And, don't let that trigger you. But, obviously there's a lot of political language around that. I think if you were to take out all of the rhetoric and the political charge, it's an effort to try and make sure that, AI is not biased. I think would be a less politically charged way to put that. Now, don't for a second say, oh, Christopher, so are you saying you think that it's actually working towards neutrality? I do not. Okay, so we'll get into my implications on this. But that's what it's stating. Hey, we don't want AI that's bent towards a specific bias, which in theory, I don't think is bad. Execution's a different story. The other one is advancing our AI in education for young people. So really bringing up American youth in AI, which again, inherently may not necessarily be a bad thing. I think it's important that, youth understand how technology works, how it's changing things, what they do with it. But what it means to throw everything at jamming AI into the educational system for young people, given things, I think inherently brings a lot of risks. One had to do with like the federal procurement process, like restoring, I think one was like restoring common sense. Of course, the language is always intentionally divisive. So just be careful with that, especially if you read it and you get triggered by political stuff. Just know you're going to be pissed off when you read this. Okay. You will. You're going to be mad. But try and see what's underneath it and try and think about what's underneath it. So some of it is, how does the US buy, spend, things like that. Again, I don't think inherently bad. I think it is good that we have solid processes and procedures for how we buy and sell goods and the way the government handles that. Fine. And then removing barriers to leadership. So this is a lot to do with, again, if you believe AI is the solution to everything, then you are going to want to remove any potential barriers that may slow down people from being able to advance the technology or adopt and integrate it. Okay, so that's another one. And then the initial recessions of harmful executive orders, that was kind of not necessarily related to AI as much, but you get the gist of it. Okay, so one, really, we're going to try and sell AI as our primary industry good to the rest of the world. We really, and there, the one I skipped was the really effort to accelerate data center building. So we're going to see a ton of that. Then preventing the woke, the language, removing bias, emphasis on the American youth education and AI, common sense to procurement, and then removing barriers to leadership, like removing the barriers that we have to this. I think the implications of this are, quite frankly, a little bit terrifying. Okay. And you're going to see that when I get to my third point, which is some of the data coming back on the safety index. All right. We are literally preparing ourselves to throw all that we have at AI. And there's already lots of language related to this. And we're laying the framework for a cultural movement of believing that AI is the solution to everything is patriotic. And if you don't believe it, you are anti-patriotic, which again, to me, sets the ground for some just very dangerous thinking, because then we turn technology into a political statement instead of assessing it for what it can do and the risks associated with it and how effective is it. It just becomes, you have to support this if you're a good, XYZ political party. You have to support this if you love America. And I want, from a respond to that, I would encourage everybody to not get sucked into that, because this is going to ramp up very quickly. And so I would encourage everybody to step back and not get sucked into that vortex of, AI it shows how much you love America. No, it does not. If you are concerned about risks, if you are raising risks, if you are not comfortable running headfirst into AI adoption, you're not anti-American. Conversely, if you are all for AI and think there's too much bureaucracy, you are not aligned with XYZ political party. And I think we need to be really, really careful of this. So I would encourage everybody to just step back and watch that, because I firmly believe we are going to pour gasoline all over this. And as if we need any more division among each other, we don't need to divide among each other because of our views on AI. Okay. We just don't. So please be careful. Just because somebody says they're all for AI, don't assume that they are, in support of the Trump administration. If they say they are, concerned about where we're going with AI, don't assume that they hate the Trump administration. Don't think you're wearing an American flag and proud to be an American because you support AI, or you're a terrorist because you don't. And I think that may sound extreme, but I really do think, based on where this is going, especially given some of the global political geopolitics associated with it, that is a real risk we need to all be mindful of and need to be paying attention to in ourselves, that we don't get sucked into this, because it's coming. I have concerns for where this is going to go, because when we just start saying this at all costs, which is largely what this is saying. I mean, when you look at it and think about this from a macro level, we're saying, let's pour this into our American youth. Let's indoctrinate them with AI is genius and is the solution to every problem. When you say this is going to become our biggest economic factor, the success of the American economy is going to be based on our ability to export and sell AI technology. And we have to do whatever we can, which means building massive data centers that are massively power hungry, do some serious stuff to the environment and just the local economies. Who cares? In the name of patriotism, we have to do it. When you say every company in the world, any barrier to this, we don't got time for safety inspections. We don't got time to see what are the long-term implications of this. We have to win this AI race. That doesn't end well. Okay. So I have concerns about where this is going. And I think everyone needs to be taking this seriously. And more so, like I said, you may go, well, what am I supposed to do about this? I can't change you're right. You may not. But you can control, one, how you respond. You can control how you vote. You can control, where and how you voice your opinions on things. So, if somebody's going to build a data center in your hometown, you might want to go, have a conversation about it. You might want to raise your voice. You might want to try and, say, hey, we're not okay with this, or at least make sure you're informed before you just go, we are going to let them do this in the name of America type of a thing. Okay. So we all need to be thinking critically. And I think that's one of the other big implications. If you are waiting on the institutions, the organizations, if you're waiting on someone else to protect you from the fallout of AI, this AI action plan is a clear indication that day is not coming. It's not coming. So, if anything, it is now more than ever your responsibility to take ownership of how you respond, how you engage with, how you adopt, how you think critically about the use of AI. It is on you. And if you do not take that responsibility seriously, just know the entire cultural current is going to be do whatever you can and don't ask questions. And if you're someone who asks questions, you are a problem to the system. Okay. So it's how far this goes. I'm not trying to stir up, oh my gosh, if you speak out about your concerns about AI, you're going to get silence. Like, no, that is not helpful. But what I am saying is that there's going to be tremendous pressure to just say AI is wonderful. It's the best thing ever. We should do whatever it takes and not consider the costs, and who cares who gets hurt in the process, because this is how we win. And that's the environment that we're walking into right now. And so you have to take responsibility for that, knowing there's probably going to be a lot that's outside of your control, but there's still a lot that is within your control. And I think you're going to have to think through some of the ethical and moral implications of AI. How do you feel about that? Think about it from the education system. If this moves forward and we say kids are going to be, pushed with AI first and AI everything, and you're a parent, you're going to need to decide, how are you going to respond to that? I don't have the answers, just to be clear. I may have feedback on specific situations. If people ask me follow-up questions, I will absolutely have guidance or perspective or things to think about. But I'm not going to come to anybody and go, so here is what you need to do. Here is what you should do in response to this. I'm going to give you the guideposts and say, right now, indicators are it's AI, America is AI at all costs, no matter what. And anybody who says anything otherwise is a friction point to be dealt with. So that's where we're headed. So just know that you're going to be swimming against that current if you choose not to participate in it. And I think based on the next update I have, there are a lot of good reasons we should be swimming against that current. And I would encourage everyone to swim against that current. Now, swimming against that current does not mean, take radical action. Absolutely not. I don't think radical action is ever a wise move. I'm not saying, be anti-AI. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're going to need to start doing this. And if you're waiting on a company or a government to tell you what to do, I'm telling you what it's going to tell you to do. Right now, I'm telling you based on this AI action plan, this is what the institutions, this is what organizations, and this is what everyone is going to tell you to do. So the question is that what you want to do? Is that what you're going to participate in? And if not, how are you going to respond? Okay. And I think you need to think through those things right now. And I think you need to think through them carefully because more and more they are going to have implications. And I think we're just going to see this continue to rise. And so if you didn't think this AI thing was serious, it definitely is. Now, to give some context to what is fueling this is China, as would expect, 3 days after the US released theirs, China released their action plan. Now, the difference is theirs is a global action plan. America's is very much the American AI action plan. In true American arrogance, the US is going to do it all by themselves. They don't want to participate, and they don't want anybody's help because we're America. We're the best. We can do it all on our own, and help is weakness. China responded with, their own version of it, and theirs is much more of a cooperative. It's using a lot of terms. It's global partnership, global governance, all this other stuff. Now, before anybody in the comments or the nasty messages I get somewhere else says, "Oh, so you're pro-China," that is not what I'm saying. Okay, I don't for a second think that China's AI action plan is somehow good and inherently well-intentioned, because there's an internal version of it that isn't the public one. And I'm very aware of the fact that there's a whole arms race going on right now. And AI is the new nuclear weapon, right? We're entering a Cold War era, except AI is the weapon that everybody's trying to tackle. So I don't for a second think America's approach bad, China, oh, good, and we should be on board with that. What I'm saying is this is what's fueling this, is we've got some geopolitical stuff going on, which is what's pouring gasoline all over this, as China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, are working to figure out what the future looks like. And of course, America's, trying to do its own thing. Now, I'm not a political commentator, so I'm not going to get into the geopolitics of all this stuff, but there are factors that are affecting this. And so I'm giving you this heads up. So when you start to see some of the things that are going to start coming about how important it is to get on board with this, how important it is to fully embrace the American AI action plan and embrace where we're going with technology, and to be a good citizen and, fully surrender to whatever it is that needs to be done. Just know that that's where some of this stuff is coming from. Now, I am a firm believer that we're called to be good citizens, in the exception of where, we're being asked, if we are ever asked to do something that just truly is in full violation of what we think is right. So, we're all going to have to navigate what it means to walk this. Don't say, well, Christopher, what's your universal position on how we respond? I probably will not have one, other than you got some work to do ahead of you right now. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about this, because it is serious, and this is going to only ramp up more. So my response, what should you do with this? One, get to know what it is. I think for most people, what I described is probably the level of detail that you need to know. fact check it though. You can go check it out. And like I said, you're going to get pissed off when you read it because there's all sorts of political language in our politics. And so I wanted to strip that out and just say, hey, here's what it's saying. Here's what I think the implications are. That's neutral. Like, I have opinions on those things, but that's what it's saying. You now need to do the work to go, okay, now how do I feel about this? What do I think we're going to see? And I'm going to be watching what the connection points to this are. I'm already seeing things be deregulated all over the place. I'm already seeing companies being incentivized to, use AI and come up with AI solutions. And, there's some potential good that I guess could come out of this, but we're all going to need to do some work to figure out how we respond.